The space station called Nero 9 floated above a dead gray planet, surrounded by broken ships and cold silence. From far away, the station looked powerful and rich, but inside it was full of crime, fear, and hungry people trying to survive another day. Rainwater leaked from old pipes in the ceiling of the lower market streets, while neon lights flickered weakly across rusty metal walls. Aliens from hundreds of worlds pushed through crowded pathways carrying cargo, weapons, and stolen technology. Nobody trusted anyone on Nero 9, especially not humans. Ethan Cole walked through the market with tired eyes and heavy steps, carrying a metal toolbox over his shoulder. He worked in Cargo Sector 12, fixing damaged transport ships for very little money. Every day was the same for him. Wake up, repair ships, avoid trouble, and survive. The human sighed as he stopped near a small food stand. "One protein wrap," he said quietly. The old vendor looked at him with annoyance. "You still owe credits from yesterday." Ethan rubbed his forehead, already exhausted. "I'll pay tomorrow. You said that yesterday too." The vendor replied coldly, before Ethan could answer. Screaming suddenly echoed through the market. People started running in panic, knocking over crates and machines. Armed soldiers wearing black armor forced their way into the crowd, their glowing red visors scanning every face around them. The symbol on their armor made nearby aliens instantly look away in fear, a silver crown surrounded by flames. The mark of the ancient Zalker Empire. Ethan frowned, confused. The Zalker Empire had disappeared 5,000 years ago. At least that was what history claimed. One of the soldiers activated a loudspeaker. "Attention citizens of Nero 9, the mechanical voice announced. A dangerous royal target has escaped containment. Report all suspicious children immediately." The market became silent. Nobody wanted problems with soldiers like these. Then Ethan noticed movement near a pile of broken cargo containers. A small figure hid behind the shadows, trembling with fear. It was a little alien girl, maybe 10 years old, wearing a dirty gray cloak that was too large for her small body. Her silver eyes glowed softly beneath the hood. The moment she looked toward the soldiers, pure terror appeared on her face. One soldier suddenly pointed directly toward her hiding place. "There!" he shouted. The girl immediately ran into the crowd. People quickly moved away from her, afraid to get involved. The soldiers chased her without mercy, pushing civilians aside. Ethan watched silently for a moment. He should ignore this. It was not his problem. But then the girl tripped and crashed hard onto the metal floor, only a few feet away from him. The soldiers were getting closer. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward and blocked their path. "She went that way." He lied while pointing toward another corridor. The soldiers hesitated only briefly before continuing their chase in the wrong direction. The second they disappeared, the girl grabbed Ethan's jacket tightly, breathing heavily. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me." Ethan looked down at her carefully. Up close, she looked even more strange. Small glowing symbols moved slowly across the skin of her hands like living light. "What did you do?" Ethan asked quietly. The girl shook her head quickly. "I didn't do anything," she said nervously. "They want something my family protected." Suddenly loud alarms echoed through the station again. More soldiers were arriving. The girl looked terrified, then quickly reached beneath her cloak and pulled out a long object wrapped in old dark cloth. She pushed it into Ethan's hands. The second his fingers touched the object, everything changed. A powerful shockwave exploded through the market. Lights burst overhead. Machines shut down instantly. The entire station lost power, plunging thousands of people into darkness. Panicked screams filled the air. Then the cloth around the object slowly unraveled by itself. Underneath was an ancient silver sword covered in glowing blue symbols. The blade looked impossibly old, yet completely untouched by time. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. The sword suddenly began glowing brighter and brighter. A deep ancient voice echoed across the entire station, shaking the walls around them. "Royal bloodline detected. Every screen on Nero 9 instantly turned on by itself, displaying unknown alien symbols. The soldiers froze in shock. Even the civilians stopped moving. Then the sword released another pulse of energy. Its glowing edge slowly turned toward Ethan. Human compatibility confirmed. The voice announced. The entire market went silent. One soldier removed his helmet in horror. "That's impossible," he whispered. Ethan looked down at the frightened child beside him, completely confused. "What exactly is this thing?" he asked slowly. The little girl stared at the glowing sword with fear in her silver eyes. Then she gave the answer that changed Ethan's life forever. "It's the weapon that destroyed galaxies." Dark emergency lights flashed across the halls of Nero 9, casting long red shadows over the metal walls. The station was still shaking from the strange energy pulse released by the ancient sword. People were panicking everywhere. Some believed the station was under attack. Others thought an ancient curse had awakened. But Ethan Cole only cared about one thing right now: getting out alive. "Move," he whispered urgently to the alien girl. She followed closely beside him as they pushed through narrow maintenance corridors. Hidden behind the crowded market sectors, far behind them, soldiers shouted orders while security drones searched every hallway. "Seal all exits." One voice echoed through the speakers. "The relic must not leave the station." Ethan tightened his grip on the glowing sword wrapped beneath his jacket. Even through the cloth, he could feel heat moving through the metal like a heartbeat. The little girl kept staring at the weapon nervously, as if she regretted giving it to him. Finally, they reached Cargo Sector 12. Rows of damaged ships filled the giant docking bay, while mechanics ran around trying to restore power systems. Ethan quickly led the girl toward an old cargo transport ship parked near the far wall. The ship looked old and ugly compared to modern vessels. Scratches covered its gray hull, and one engine constantly leaked smoke. But it still flew, and right now that was enough. Ethan opened the side hatch and pushed the girl inside. "Stay quiet," he warned. "If anyone finds you, we're both dead." The girl nodded silently inside the ship. Dim yellow lights flickered weakly as the backup generator struggled to stay alive. Ethan sealed the hatch and finally looked at the child properly for the first time. She was small and thin, probably from lack of food. Her silver eyes glowed softly in the darkness, and strange blue markings moved slowly across her skin like living tattoos. She looked exhausted. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. The girl hesitated before answering quietly. "Lyra." "I'm Ethan," he replied. For a few seconds, silence filled the ship. Then Ethan placed the ancient sword carefully on a nearby table. The weapon instantly released a soft humming sound. Both of them stepped back. Suddenly, blue holographic symbols appeared in the air above the blade, rotating slowly. Lyra's face immediately turned pale. "No," she whispered. "What?" Ethan asked. "The relic is waking up." Before Ethan could respond, the hologram suddenly changed shape, displaying a giant map filled with stars and unknown worlds. Then a single sentence appeared in glowing alien language. Lyra stared at it in horror. Ethan frowned. "What does it say?" The little girl swallowed nervously. "It says, 'The Guardian has returned.'" A loud explosion suddenly shook the docking bay outside. Ethan rushed toward the ship window and looked outside. More black armored soldiers had entered the cargo sector, accompanied by floating combat drones. Civilians were being forced onto the ground while scanners searched every ship. "They found us already," Ethan muttered. Lyra looked terrified. "They'll kill everyone if they find the relic," she whispered. Ethan looked back at her sharply. "What exactly are these people?" The girl lowered her eyes. "My family protected the relic for generations," she said softly. "But the Zalker Empire fell long ago, and now powerful people want the weapon for themselves." Ethan crossed his arms, still confused. "You keep calling it a weapon," he said. "But it's just a sword." Lyra slowly looked up at him. "No," she answered quietly. "The sword is only the key." Before Ethan could ask more questions, The ship computer suddenly activated by itself, warning. Unknown energy detected. Ethan turned quickly toward the sword. The glowing symbols on the blade were becoming brighter. Then, pain suddenly shot through Ethan's arm. He gasped and grabbed his wrist. The same glowing blue markings now appeared on his skin where he touched the relic earlier. They slowly moved up his arm like burning light beneath his flesh. Lyra stared at him with wide eyes. "That's impossible," she whispered again. "What is happening to me?" Ethan demanded, but before she could answer, the cargo bay doors outside exploded inward. Soldiers stormed into the docking area with weapons raised. "We know you're here," a voice shouted through loudspeakers. "Surrender the child and the relic immediately." Ethan cursed under his breath and rushed toward the pilot controls. The old cargo ship roared loudly as its engines slowly powered on. Outside, soldiers immediately opened fire. Laser blasts slammed against the hull while alarms screamed throughout. "The ship, we can't escape," Lyra whispered fearfully. "There are too many ships outside." But Ethan ignored her. He slammed his hand onto the controls and forced maximum power into the engines. The cargo ship burst forward violently, smashing through crates and repair equipment as soldiers jumped out of the way. Warning sirens echoed everywhere. Then suddenly, every light inside the ship turned blue. The ancient sword floated upward by itself. A deep voice echoed once again through the cabin. "Primary user confirmed." Ethan froze. Then the voice spoke the words that made his blood run cold. "Welcome back, Commander." The old cargo ship shook violently as it escaped Nero 9. Warning alarms flashed across the control panel, while sparks fell from damaged wires above Ethan's head. Behind them, the giant space station slowly disappeared into the darkness of space. But the danger was far from over. 3 black warships followed closely behind, their engines glowing like red fire in the endless stars. "They're still tracking us," Ethan said while gripping the controls tightly. Lyra stood silently near the glowing sword floating in the center of the ship. The strange blue light from the relic reflected across her frightened silver eyes. Ethan looked back at her for a moment. That voice still echoed inside his mind. "Welcome back, Commander." It made no sense. He was not a commander. He was just a tired cargo worker trying to survive another day. But somehow the relic recognized him, and that terrified him more than the soldiers chasing them. Suddenly the ship computer warned. Loudly, "Missile lock detected." "Hold on," Ethan shouted. A second later, explosions lit up space behind them. The enemy warships opened fire, sending blue plasma blasts across the darkness. The old cargo ship twisted sharply between floating asteroid debris while metal screamed around them. Lyra nearly fell but grabbed the wall for support. "You know how to fly this thing?" she asked nervously. "Not well," Ethan answered honestly. Another explosion shook the ship harder than before. One engine instantly died. Warning. Left engine failure. The cargo ship spun wildly through space, barely missing a giant asteroid. Ethan fought the controls with both hands, sweat running down his face. Then suddenly the glowing relic reacted again. The sword released another pulse of blue energy that spread through the entire ship. For one strange moment, everything became silent. The damaged controls suddenly repaired themselves. Dead screens turned back on. Even the broken engine restarted. Automatically, Ethan stared at the controls in shock. "What is this thing?" he whispered. Lyra slowly looked toward the floating relic. "It's alive," she answered quietly. The ship finally escaped into a nearby asteroid field where the larger enemy warships could not easily follow. After several dangerous minutes, the explosions behind them finally stopped. For now, they were safe. The cabin became quiet except for the soft humming of the engines. Ethan leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. Then he turned toward Lyra seriously. "No more secrets," he said firmly. "Who are you really?" The little girl stayed silent for a long moment. Her small hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the floor. Finally she spoke. "My full name is Lyra Vale Corrine," she said softly. "Last daughter of House Corrine." The royal bloodline of the Zalkar Empire. Ethan's eyes widened. A princess? Lyra nodded slowly. My people ruled thousands of systems long ago, she explained. But after the Great Betrayal, the Empire was destroyed. The Great Betrayal? Ethan asked. Lyra walked slowly toward the ship window, staring into the stars. 5,000 years ago, the Zalkar Empire fought a terrible war, she said quietly. An enemy race wanted the Relic because it controlled ancient machines, powerful enough to destroy entire galaxies. Ethan glanced toward the floating sword. And your people lost? No, Lyra whispered. We were betrayed from inside. Her voice became weaker, filled with sadness. The royal families were hunted down, she continued. Entire worlds burned, billions died, and the survivors disappeared into hiding. Ethan could hear pain in her voice. For generations, my family protected the Relic in secret, she said. We moved from planet to planet hiding from those soldiers. Then what happened? Ethan asked quietly. Lyra's silver eyes slowly filled with tears. They found us, she whispered. Silence filled the ship again. Ethan understood immediately. Her family was gone. She was alone. The young girl wiped her eyes quickly and tried to stay strong. My mother told me something before she died. Lyra continued softly. She said the Relic would someday awaken again when the Guardian returned. Ethan frowned. The Guardian? But before Lyra could answer, warning alarms suddenly activated again. Unknown ship detected. Both of them looked toward the radar screen. A single ship slowly emerged from behind the asteroids. It was small, fast, and heavily armed, the symbol painted. Across its hull looked like a black skull. Lyra's face instantly turned pale. No, she whispered fearfully. What is it? Ethan asked. A bounty hunter, almost immediately. A transmission request appeared on the screen. Ethan accepted it carefully. The face of a massive alien with metal implants covering half his skull appeared. One glowing red eye stared directly at them. Well, the bounty hunter growled with a cruel smile. The little princess has been difficult to find. Ethan reached slowly toward the ship controls. We're not looking for trouble, he said cautiously. The bounty hunter laughed darkly. Unfortunately for you, human, he replied. Half the galaxy wants that child dead. His read mechanical. I suddenly focused directly on Ethan, then his smile slowly disappeared. Wait, he muttered quietly. The alien leaned closer toward the screen, almost shocked. That face. Lyra looked confused, but the bounty hunter suddenly whispered. Something far more terrifying than any threat so far. You don't even know who the human really is, do you? The transmission suddenly ended, for several seconds. Complete silence filled the cargo ship. Only the low sound of the engines echoed through the dark cabin. Ethan stared at the empty screen, confused and uneasy. You don't even know who the human really is. The bounty hunter's final words repeated again and again inside his head. Lyra looked just as disturbed. What did he mean? She asked quietly. Ethan shook his head slowly. I have no idea. He answered honestly, but deep inside, something felt wrong. The Relic called him Commander. The glowing marks on his arm were spreading slowly, and now strangers across the galaxy seemed to recognize him for some impossible reason. None of it made sense. Suddenly, the ancient sword floating nearby released another pulse of blue light. The entire cabin became colder. Then strange symbols appeared again in the air above the Relic, rotating slowly like a living machine waking from sleep. Lyra stepped backward nervously. It's trying to show us something, she whispered. The symbols suddenly changed into images. A giant battlefield appeared as a hologram in the middle of the cabin. Massive warships burned across space while entire planets exploded in fire. Thousands of alien soldiers fought beside humans wearing silver armor marked with the same symbol glowing on Ethan's arm. Ethan stared in shock. Humans? He whispered. Lyra looked confused. That's impossible, she said. Humans were never part of the ancient empire. But the hologram continued changing. A tall human commander appeared at the center of the battlefield, leading both humans and Zalkar warriors together. His armor glowed blue with the same energy flowing through the relic. Then the commander slowly removed his helmet. Ethan froze. The man looked exactly like him. Same face, same scar above the eyebrow. Lyra looked toward Ethan in disbelief. "That can't be real," she whispered. The hologram suddenly zoomed closer toward the ancient human commander. Then the same deep voice from the relic echoed across the cabin. "Commander Orion Cole, final protector of the Guardian fleet." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Cole, that was his family name. The hologram showed the commander placing the ancient relic sword inside a hidden chamber, while explosions destroyed the world around him. Then his final words echoed through the ship: "If humanity survives, the Guardian will return." The hologram vanished instantly, leaving the cabin silent again. Ethan stepped backward slowly, unable to breathe properly. "This is impossible," he muttered. "My parents were mechanics from Earth Colony 7, Lyra." Looked at him carefully. "Maybe your family history is not what you think," she said softly before Ethan could answer. The ship computer suddenly activated automatically. New coordinates received. A hidden star map appeared on the main screen. One distant planet flashed red at the edge of known space forbidden zone. Planet Erebus, warning. Nitrogen monoxide authorized entry. Lyra's face immediately filled with fear. "No one goes there," she whispered. "That planet was erased from every galactic record." Ethan frowned. "Then why is the relic sending us there?" The answer came instantly. "Guardian system awaiting commander authorization," the relic voice announced. Ethan looked toward the floating sword again, frustration growing inside him. "I'm not your commander," he snapped. "For the first time," the relic answered him directly. "Identity confirmed," the voice replied calmly. "Genetic match, 99.8%. Ethan felt cold fear run through his body. The glowing marks on his arm suddenly burned painfully again. He grabbed the side of the control panel, breathing heavily. Then flashes suddenly exploded inside his mind. He saw giant machines walking across burning worlds, human soldiers fighting beside alien warriors, a massive black fleet destroying entire planets, and standing above all of it, a giant metal figure taller than mountains, its blue eyes glowing like stars. Ethan gasped and nearly collapsed. Lyra rushed toward him quickly. "What did you see?" she asked. Ethan looked up slowly, fear visible across his face. "The Guardian," he whispered. At that exact moment, warning alarms screamed through the cabin again. Multiple hostile ships detected. Ethan quickly looked at the radar screen. His face darkened immediate. More enemy ships were entering the asteroid field, at least 20 this time, and leading them was a giant war cruiser nearly 10 times larger than the others. "They found us again," Lyra whispered fearfully. A transmission appeared instantly on the screen. This time, a cold female voice filled the cabin. "Surrender the relic and the child," she ordered, "or your ship will be destroyed." Ethan looked at the damaged cargo ship around him. There was no way they could outrun an entire fleet. Lyra slowly lowered her head. "You should leave me," she whispered sadly. "If they only want me, maybe they'll let you live." Ethan stared at her for a moment. The frightened little girl was trying to sacrifice herself to save him. Something about that made anger rise deep inside him. He stood up slowly and looked out at the enemy fleet surrounding them in the darkness of space. Then he said something that surprised even himself. "No." Lyra looked up in shock. Ethan walked toward the controls with determination growing in his eyes. "We're going to Erebus," he said firmly. "And we're finding out the truth." Outside the ship windows, enemy warships slowly moved closer, their weapons beginning to charge. Then suddenly, the ancient relic sword floated into Ethan's hand by itself, and somewhere deep in the darkness of space, something ancient finally began waking up. The cargo ship jumped through hyperspace like a wounded animal trying to escape hunters. Blue light surrounded the ship while the engines screamed under dangerous pressure. Inside the cabin, warning alarms continued flashing nonstop. Ethan held the controls tightly while Lyra sat quietly beside the glowing relic sword. Neither of them spoke much after leaving the enemy fleet behind. Too many questions filled the silence between them. Who was Commander Orion Cole? Why did the relic react to Ethan? And what exactly was waiting for them on planet Erebus? Hours later, the ship finally exited hyperspace with a violent shake. The stars outside slowly returned. Then Ethan saw it. Planet Erebus. The entire world looked dark and lifeless, covered in endless storms and black oceans. Massive clouds moved across the planet like giant shadows hiding something ancient beneath them. Even from space, the place felt wrong. Lyra stared silently through the window, fear clear in her glowing silver eyes. "My mother once told me stories about this world," she whispered. "She said gods used to sleep here." Ethan looked at the ancient relic resting beside her. At this point, he was starting to believe anything was possible. The cargo ship entered the atmosphere carefully, shaking hard as lightning exploded through thick storm clouds around them. Rain slammed against the ship hull while powerful winds pushed them dangerously side to side. "Easy, easy," Ethan muttered while fighting the controls. Finally, through the heavy rain, something massive appeared below the clouds. Lyra gasped softly. Huge stone statues stood across the dark landscape below. They were enormous, taller than mountains, partially buried beneath centuries of dust and rock. Some statues looked alien, others looked human, and every single one held the same glowing sword symbol carved into their chests. Ethan felt chills run through his body. The cargo ship landed roughly near the ruins of an ancient city hidden deep inside a giant canyon. The engine slowly powered down, leaving only the sound of rain hitting metal outside. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the relic sword suddenly began glowing brighter. A beam of blue light shot from the blade toward the canyon ahead. "It's guiding us," Lyra whispered. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and slowly opened the cargo hatch. Cold wind immediately rushed inside, carrying dust and rain with it. The outside world looked completely abandoned. Broken towers covered the landscape while giant statues watched silently from the darkness like forgotten guardians. The ground itself was cracked and scarred, as if some ancient war had destroyed the entire planet long ago. Ethan carefully stepped forward while Lyra followed close behind him, holding the relic tightly. As they walked deeper into the ruins, Ethan noticed strange markings covering the stone walls around them. Some showed humans and aliens fighting together. Others showed giant machines standing beside armies beneath burning skies. Then Ethan suddenly stopped walking. Ahead of them stood a massive doorway built into the side of a mountain. The doorway alone was hundreds of feet tall, far too large for normal beings. Blue symbols across its surface slowly began glowing as the relic reacted. The giant doors trembled loudly, then slowly started opening. Dust exploded outward into the storm air as darkness waited beyond the entrance. Lyra looked nervous. "We should leave," she whispered softly. "This place feels alive." But Ethan stepped forward carefully, shining his flashlight into the darkness ahead. Inside the mountain was a giant underground city. Ancient metal structures stretched endlessly into the darkness, while enormous machines sat abandoned beneath layers of dust. The entire place looked frozen in time. Then Ethan noticed something strange on the floor. Footprints, fresh footprints. Someone else was here. Before he could warn Lyra, a loud metallic sound echoed through the darkness nearby. Clang! Both of them froze instantly. Another sound followed, closer this time. Something was moving inside the ruins. Ethan slowly reached for a rusted metal pipe lying nearby, while Lyra gripped the relic sword tightly. The sounds became heavier. Slow footsteps echoed through the giant chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling above them. Then two glowing blue eyes suddenly appeared deep within the darkness. Lyra gasped and stepped backward. A giant machine slowly emerged from the shadows. It looked humanoid, but far larger than any normal robot. Its body was covered in ancient battle scars and broken armor plates. One arm was missing completely, yet somehow it was still alive. The machine stared directly at Ethan. For one terrifying moment, nobody moved. Then the giant machine suddenly dropped onto one knee with a thunderous impact. Its glowing eyes brightened. Commander recognized, it said in a deep mechanical voice. Ethan's breathing stopped behind the machine. Hundreds of other giant figures slowly began lighting up across the darkness of the underground city. Blue eyes opened everywhere, one after another, like an ancient army finally waking from sleep after 5,000 years. The underground city shook as hundreds of blue lights slowly awakened in the darkness. Massive machines stood up one after another, their metal bodies groaning like ancient giants rising from the grave. Dust fell from the ceiling while deep mechanical sounds echoed through the endless ruins beneath planet Erebus. Ethan stood frozen beside Lyra, staring at the impossible scene in front of him. An entire army had been sleeping here for 5,000 years, and somehow they recognized him. The giant machine kneeling before Ethan slowly lowered its head again. "Awaiting command, Commander Orion Cole," it said. Ethan immediately shook his head. "You have the wrong person," he answered firmly. But the machine's glowing blue eyes did not change. "Genetic signature confirmed," it replied. "Guardian fleet standing by." Behind it, hundreds of giant war machines remained perfectly still, waiting for orders. Lyra looked both terrified and amazed. "My people believed these machines were only myths," she whispered. Ethan stared around the underground city carefully. Now he understood why the galaxy feared the Relic. This was not just a weapon. It was an army powerful enough to destroy civilizations. Suddenly, loud alarms echoed across the ruins. "Warning! Hostile fleet approaching planet Erebus." The giant machines instantly activated. Blue energy flowed through the ancient city while massive screens turned on around them. A holographic image of space appeared above the ruins. Dozens of enemy warships surrounded the planet, and more were arriving every second. Lyra's face turned pale. "They followed us," she whispered. Ethan clenched his fists tightly. At the center of the hologram stood the massive enemy cruiser from before, but now another ship slowly moved beside it. A gigantic black warship larger than an entire city. Its surface was covered with red glowing weapons, powerful enough to burn worlds. The giant machine beside Ethan suddenly spoke again. "Enemy flagship identified, Dreadnought Obsidian." Lyra looked shocked. "That ship destroyed my homeworld," she whispered quietly. Before Ethan could respond, a transmission suddenly forced itself onto the hologram screen. A tall alien woman wearing black armor appeared, her cold silver eyes staring directly at Ethan. "You continue making mistakes, human," she said calmly. "Surrender the relic and the child now." Ethan crossed his arms angrily. "And if I refuse?" he asked. The woman smiled slightly. "Then everyone on this planet dies," she answered coldly. Behind her, giant weapons on the enemy fleet slowly began charging, glowing red across the darkness of space. Lyra lowered her head sadly. "This is my fault," she whispered. "They'll never stop hunting us." Ethan looked toward the frightened little girl standing beside him. For days she had been running, hiding, and surviving alone while the entire galaxy chased her like a monster. But despite everything, she still cared more about protecting others than herself. That reminded Ethan painfully of someone, his younger sister, long ago, before disease took her away back on Earth Colony 7. She used to look at him with the same frightened eyes whenever storms hit their small home. Ethan slowly placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. Lyra looked up at him silently. Then suddenly the entire underground city shook violently. The enemy fleet had opened fire. Massive explosions struck the planet's surface above them, while dust and rock crashed from the ceiling. "Warning! Surface defenses failing." The giant machine beside Ethan finally stood to its full height. It was enormous, nearly as tall as a skyscraper. Blue energy pulsed through glowing lines across its body, while ancient weapons slowly activated across its arms and shoulders. Then more giant machines behind it awakened completely. An entire mechanical army prepared for war. The lead machine looked toward Ethan again. "Commander," it said, "permission to engage enemy forces." Ethan stared at the hologram of the enemy fleet destroying the planet above them. Fear filled his chest. If he gave the order, thousands would die, maybe millions. This ancient army was built for war on a galactic scale. Lyra stepped closer to him quietly. "What do we do?" she whispered. Ethan looked down at the glowing relic in her hands, then toward the giant machines waiting for his command. Finally, he made his decision. "We protect the planet," he said firmly, "but no unnecessary killing." For the first time, the giant machine hesitated. "Directive conflicts with original war protocols," it replied. "Then change the protocols," Ethan answered sharply. The machine remained silent for several seconds. Then its glowing eyes brightened again. "New command accepted," it announced. Suddenly, the entire underground city came alive. Massive doors across the ruins began opening toward the stormy surface above. One by one, giant guardian machines marched upward from the underground city toward the battlefield outside. The ground itself trembled beneath their footsteps, far above the clouds. Enemy warships immediately turned their weapons toward the rising army. Then the battle began. Blue energy beams shot across the sky, while explosions lit up the storm clouds around planet Erebus. One guardian machine punched directly through an enemy cruiser before throwing the burning wreckage into another ship. Another giant machine raised an energy shield, protecting entire mountain ranges from orbital bombardment. The galaxy had not seen war like this in thousands of years. Inside the underground command chamber, Ethan watched the battle unfold across the hologram, breathing heavily. Then suddenly the relic sword reacted again. Its blue light flashed violently through the chamber. A hidden section of the ancient city slowly opened deep beneath the ruins. Cold air rose from the darkness below. The relic voice echoed once more. "Final truth unlocked," it announced. Lyra and Ethan looked toward the opening carefully. Then the voice spoke words that changed everything. "Warning. Royal survivor detected." Lyra's eyes widened in shock. "There's another survivor?" she whispered, but the relic's next words were even more terrifying. "Survivor identity confirmed. Located aboard enemy flagship Obsidian." The underground command chamber became completely silent. Lyra stared at the glowing relic in disbelief. "No," she whispered softly. "That's impossible." Ethan looked toward the hologram showing the giant enemy flagship floating above planet Erebus, surrounded by fire and war. "You said your family died," he said carefully. "They did," Lyra answered with shaking eyes. "At least, that's what I believed." Outside, the battle across the planet grew more violent every second. Guardian machines fought against enemy warships while explosions lit up the storm clouds surrounding Erebus. Pieces of burning ships fell from the sky like meteors. But Ethan's attention stayed focused on the enemy flagship. If another royal survivor truly existed aboard that ship, then everything was far more complicated than they thought. Suddenly, the relic projected a new hologram into the air. An image of a young woman appeared. She looked older than Lyra, perhaps in her early 20s, with the same silver glowing eyes and royal markings across her skin. Lyra gasped loudly. "Sira." Tears instantly filled her eyes. "You know her?" Ethan asked. "She's my sister," Lyra whispered emotionally. "My older sister." Before Ethan could speak again, the hologram suddenly changed. A second figure appeared beside Sira, the same armored woman commanding the enemy fleet earlier, but now her face looked colder, crueler. The relic identified her immediately. High Commander Vera. The giant guardian machine beside Ethan suddenly spoke with anger in its mechanical voice. "Traitor detected," it announced. "Primary target responsible for the fall of Zalker." Ethan frowned. "She's been alive for 5,000 years?" "Cryogenic preservation," the machine answered. "Former Guardian protector turned enemy collaborator during the Great Betrayal." Lyra looked confused and hurt. "But why keep my sister alive?" she asked softly. The answer came from the relic itself. Royal blood required to activate final protocol. Ethan immediately understood. The enemy never wanted to kill the royal bloodline completely. They needed it. Sira was alive because she was the final key to controlling the ancient Guardian fleet. And now Lyra had appeared too. Suddenly alarms echoed through the chamber again. "Warning. Enemy flagship charging planetary weapon." The hologram zoomed toward the Obsidian warship. At its center, a giant red cannon slowly charged with enough energy to destroy the entire planet. Lyra's face turned pale. "They're going to destroy Erebus," she whispered. Ethan looked toward the battlefield outside. The Guardian army was strong, but not strong enough to stop a weapon that powerful in time. Then he noticed something. The enemy flagship shields were weakening during the battle. A small opening appeared near the center hull. An idea formed instantly in Ethan's mind. He looked toward the giant Guardian machine beside him. "Can one ship get close enough to board the flagship?" he asked. The machine processed for a moment. "Probability of survival, 8%, it answered. Ethan nodded slowly. "Good enough." Lyra immediately realized what he planned. "No," she said quickly. "It's suicide." Ethan looked down at her gently. "If we don't stop that weapon, everyone dies," he answered calmly. Lyra's eyes filled with fear again, just like the first day they met on Nero 9. But this time, Ethan smiled slightly. "Humans protect family," he said softly. "Remember?" Minutes later, a small Guardian assault ship launched directly into the middle of the battle. Enemy fire exploded all around them while giant machines fought across space like ancient gods at war. Ethan controlled the ship while Lyra held the glowing relic tightly beside him. The obsidian warship grew larger and larger ahead of them. Its massive cannon nearly finished charging, glowing red like a dying star. "Brace yourself," Ethan warned. The assault ship slammed through the weakened shields and crashed directly into the enemy flagship hangar. Metal screamed around them as explosions shook the entire ship. Enemy soldiers immediately surrounded the wreckage with weapons raised. Then the cargo door exploded outward. Ethan stepped through the smoke carrying the glowing relic sword in his hand. Blue energy burst across the hallway, throwing soldiers backward instantly. Lyra followed closely beside him as alarms screamed throughout the flagship. They fought their way deeper into the massive warship until finally reaching the central command chamber. There she was, Sarah. The older girl turned slowly, shock filling her silver eyes as she saw Lyra alive. "Little sister," she whispered, but before they could reunite, Commander Vera stepped forward coldly. "You should have stayed hidden," she said calmly. The massive planetary cannon outside reached full charge. Only seconds remained before Erebus would be destroyed. Ethan raised the relic sword carefully. "This ends now," he said firmly. Vera smiled darkly. "You still don't understand your true purpose, Commander Cole," she replied. Then she activated the final protocol. Suddenly every Guardian machine in space froze completely. The entire fleet stopped moving. Lyra looked horrified. What did she do? Vera's smile grew colder. "The Guardians were never built to protect the galaxy," she said quietly. "They were built to reset it." The giant hologram behind her activated, displaying thousands of worlds across known space. Targets locked, galactic purge ready. Ethan finally understood the terrible truth. The ancient machines were not defenders, they were extinction weapons. And Vera planned to use them to wipe out every civilization in the galaxy. But then something unexpected happened. Lyra stepped forward holding the relic tightly against her chest. Tears filled her silver eyes as she looked toward both Ethan and Sarah. Then she made her choice. Instead of activating the purge, she changed the command. "New directive," Lyra said bravely. "Protect life, not destroy it." The relic flashed brighter than the sun. Every Guardian machine across space instantly reactivated. But this time, their blue eyes no longer looked cold. They looked peaceful. Outside, the Guardian fleet turned against Vera's forces, destroying the enemy warships within minutes. The obsidian flagship itself slowly collapsed around them as explosions spread through its core. Ethan grabbed Lyra and Sarah quickly as the station began falling apart. Together, they escaped aboard a Guardian ship moments before the flagship exploded above planet Erebus. Weeks later, the war finally ended. The surviving worlds across the galaxy slowly rebuilt together. Humans and aliens formed a new alliance stronger than before. And in the center of the restored Zalkur capital, stories spread about the human who protected an alien child when nobody else would. One evening, while watching the stars from a quiet balcony, Lyra softly held Ethan's hand. Then for the first time, she smiled peacefully and said the one word Ethan never expected to hear again. "Father." Far above them, the ancient Guardian fleet stood silent among the stars. No longer weapons of extinction, but protectors of a new galaxy, and after 5,000 years of silence, humanity had finally answered the call.